From translation, RSV Revised Standard Version, this 150th day of the year today we are reading passages, Esther 1-5, Esther chapter 1, verses 1 to 34. This happened in the days of Ahasuerus, the Ahasuerus who reigned over 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia. In those days when King Ahasuerus sat on his royal throne in Susa the capital, in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a feast for all his officials and servants. The army of Persia and Media and the nobles and governors of the provinces were before him, while he showed the riches of his royal glory and the splendor of his majesty for many days, 180 days. And when these days were completed, the king gave for all the people present in Susa the capital, both great and small, a feast lasting 7 days, in the court of the garden of the king's palace. There were white cotton curtains and blue hangings, fastened with cords of fine linen, and purple to silver rings and marble pillars, and also couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, alabaster, and hard stone. They gave them wine in festal vessels, and the vessels were varied, as the king wished. And the drinking was according to this decree, there is no compulsion. For the king has ordered every man to do as he wishes. Queen Vashti gave a feast for the women in the palace, which belonged to King Ahasuerus. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Haman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcas, the 7 eunuchs who served King Ahasuerus, to bring Queen Vashti before the king with her royal crown, in order to show the peoples and the officials her beauty. For she was fair to behold. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command conveyed by the eunuchs. At this the king was enraged, and his anger burned within him. Then the king said to the wise men who knew the times, for this was the king's procedure toward all who were versed in law and judgment, the men next to him being Karshena, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsena, and Memucan, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, who had access to the king, and who were ranked highest in the kingdom. According to the law, what is to be done to Queen Vashti, because she has not done the bidding of King Ahasuerus by the eunuchs? Then Memucan said in the presence of the king and the officials, Queen Vashti has not done wrong to the king only, but to all the officials and all the peoples who are in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For this deed of the queen will be made known to all women, so that they will look with contempt on their husbands when they are told, King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought in, but she did not come. And this day the ladies of Persia and Media who have heard of the queen's deed will tell all the king's officials. So there will be contempt and wrath in plenty. If it please the king, let a royal order be issued by him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and the Medes so that it may not be altered, that Vashti is never again to come into the presence of King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she. And when the king's decree which he shall make is proclaimed throughout all his kingdom, vast as it is, all women will give honor to their husbands, from the greatest to the least. The king and his officials approved the proposal. And the king did as Memucan proposed. He sent letters to all the royal provinces, to each province in its own script, and to each people in its own language, that every man be master in his own household, and speak according to the language of his people. In those days King Ahasuerus sat on his royal throne in Susa the capital. When the king's order and his decree were proclaimed, and when many maidens were gathered in Susa the capital in custody of Hegai, the king's chamberlain, keeper of the women, Esther also was brought to the palace into the custody of Hegai, keeper of the women. And Esther found favor in the sight of all who saw her. Hegai had brought Esther to the palace and put her in custody of Hegai, keeper of the women, in the best of the harem. And she was favored by the king and his servants, and she found favor and kindness in his sight more than all the women, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king gave a great banquet for all his officials and his servants, he separate from the banquet of Esther, and he set up the kingdom for her on that day. And when the young women were gathered together the 2nd time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther had not made known her people or her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her not to make it known. Mordecai was walking up and down in front of the court of the palace, and Esther had not yet made known her kindred and her people, as Mordecai had commanded her, for Esther obeyed Mordecai as she had when she was brought up by him. In those days, when Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthan and Teresh, 2 of the king's eunuchs, who guarded the threshold, became angry and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. And this came to the knowledge of Mordecai, who told it to Queen Esther, and Esther told the king in Mordecai's name. And when the affair was investigated and found to be so, the men were both hanged on the gallows, and it was recorded in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. Esther chapter 2, verses 1 to 23. After these things, when the anger of King Ahasuerus had abated, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what had been decreed against her. Then the king's servants who attended him said, "Let beautiful young virgins be sought for the king. And let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom to gather all the beautiful young virgins to the harem in Susa the capital, under custody of Hegai, the king's chamberlain, keeper of the women. And let their cosmetics be given them. And let the girl who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti." This pleased the king, and he did so. Now in Susa the capital there was a Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjaminite. Kish had been carried away from Jerusalem with the exiles who had been carried away with Jeconiah king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon had carried away. Mordecai had brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. The girl was beautiful and lovely, and when her father and mother died, Mordecai adopted her as his own daughter. So when the king's command and his decree were proclaimed, and when many young women were gathered in Susa the capital in custody of Hegai, Esther also was taken into the king's house and put in custody of Hegai, keeper of the women. The girl pleased him and found favor with him. And he quickly gave her her cosmetics and her portion of food, and with 7 chosen maids from the king's house, and he advanced her and her maids to the best place in the harem. Esther had not made known her people or her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her not to make it known. And every day Mordecai would walk in front of the court of the harem to learn how Esther was and what was happening to her. Now when the turn came for each young woman to go in to King Ahasuerus, after she had completed 12 months under the regulations for the women, for thus were the days of their cosmetics fulfilled. 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with spices and cosmetics for women. And when the young woman went in to the king in this way, she was given whatever she desired to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. In the evening she would go in, and in the morning she would return to the second harem in custody of Shashgaz, the king's chamberlain, who was in charge of the concubines. She would not go into the king again, unless the king delighted in her and she was summoned by name. Now when the turn came for Esther, the daughter of Hael, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as his own daughter, to go into the king, she asked for nothing but what Hegai the king's chamberlain, keeper of the women, advised. And Esther found favor in the eyes of all who saw her. So Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus in his royal palace, in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. And the king loved Esther more than all the women, and she found favor and kindness in his sight more than all the virgins. So he set the royal crown upon her head, and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king gave a great banquet for all his officials and his servants, he separate from the banquet of Esther, and on the next day he made a feast for all the people who were present in Susa the capital, great and small, for 7 days. And when the virgins were gathered together the second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther had not yet made known her kindred and her people, as Mordecai had commanded her, for Esther obeyed Mordecai as she had when she was brought up by him. In those days, as Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthan and Teresh, 2 of the king's eunuchs, who guarded the threshold, became angry and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. And this came to the knowledge of Mordecai, who told it to Queen Esther, and Esther told the king in Mordecai's name. When the affair was investigated and found to be so, the men were both hanged on the gallows. And it was recorded in the book of the Chronicles, in the presence of the king. Esther chapter 3, verses 1 to 15. After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, and advanced him, and set his seat above all the officials who were with him. And all the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage. Then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why do you transgress the king's command?" And when they spoke to him day after day, and he would not listen to them, they told Haman, in order to see whether Mordecai's words would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage to him, he was enraged. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, because they had told him who Mordecai's people were. So Haman sought to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai, throughout the kingdom of Ahasuerus. In the 1st month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast that is, they cast lots before Haman day after day, and month after month, until it fell on the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, "There is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of every other people, and they do not keep the king's laws, so that it is not for the king's profit to tolerate them. If it please the king, let a decree be issued for their destruction, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who have charge of the business, to bring it into the king's treasuries. So the king took his ring from his hand and gave it to Haman the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, "The money is given to you and the people also, to deal with as you see fit." Then the king's secretaries were summoned on the 13th day of the first month, and an edict, according to all that Haman commanded, was written to the king's satraps, and to the governors over all the provinces, and to the officials of all the peoples, to every province in its own script, and to every people in its own language. It was written in the name of King Ahasuerus and sealed with the king's ring. Letters were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with instruction and message to destroy, to slay, and to annihilate all Jews, young and old, women and children, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. A copy of the document was to be issued as a decree in every province by proclamation to all the peoples, and the day was fixed by lot. So the couriers went out, prompted by the king's command. And the decree was issued in Susa the capital, and the couriers went out in haste by order of the king. The decree was issued in Susa the capital, and the king and Haman sat down to drink. But the city of Susa was thrown into confusion. Esther chapter 4, verses 1 to 17. When Mordecai learned all that had been done, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the midst of the city, wailing with a loud and bitter cry. He went up to the entrance of the king's gate, for no one might enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. And in each province, wherever the king's command and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's maids and her eunuchs came and told her, all in bitterness of spirit and in mourning, she was in distress. Then she sent garments to clothe Mordecai, so that he might take off his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther called for Hassach, one of the king's eunuchs who had been appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what this was and why it was. Hassach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate, and Mordecai told him all that had happened to him, and the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the written decree that had been issued in Susa for their destruction, that he might show it to Esther and make it known to her, and charge her to go to the king to entreat his favor and to plead with him for her people. And Hassach went and told Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Esther spoke to Hassach and gave him a command for Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman approaches the king in the inner court without being called, there is but one law, to put him to death, except the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter, that he may live. And I have not been called to come in to the king for these 30 days. And they told Mordecai what Esther had said. Then Mordecai told them to answer Esther, "Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you of all the Jews will escape. For if you keep silence at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Then Esther said in reply to Mordecai, "Go, gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf, and neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." Mordecai went away and did as Esther had commanded him. Esther chapter 5, verses 1 to 14. On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace, in front of the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne inside the hall, opposite the entrance to the palace. And when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she won his favor. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Then the king said to her, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request?" "Even to half of my kingdom it will be granted you." And Esther said, "If I have found favor in your sight, O king, let the king and Haman come today to the banquet that I have prepared for him." Then the king said, "Bring Haman quickly, so that we may do as Esther has asked." So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. And at the banquet of wine the king said to Esther, "What is your request, and what is your petition?" "It shall be granted you, even to half of my kingdom it will be granted you." Then Esther answered, "My request and my petition is this: if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet that I will prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king has said." Then Haman went out that day joyful and glad of heart. But when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate, and that he neither rose nor trembled before him, Haman was filled with fury against Mordecai. Nevertheless Haman restrained himself and went home. And he sent and brought his friends and his wife Zeresh. And Haman recounted to them his great riches, the number of his sons, all the promotions with which the king had honored him, and how he had advanced him above the officials and the servants of the king. And Haman said, moreover, Queen Esther admitted no one but me to come with the king to the banquet that she prepared, and tomorrow also I am invited by her along with the king. But all this is nothing to me so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Then his wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, Let a gallows 50 cubits high be made, and in the morning tell the king to have Mordecai hanged upon it. Then go merrily with the king to the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, and he had the gallows made.